Very good evening to you, South Africa, those watching around the world. My name is Blaine Herman, and this is It's Topical, our digital audience with us tonight. Some of them joining us from the University of Johannesburg and UNISA. Good to have them on the program. Among them as well, our guests. Going to get to them in a short while. The situation in the Democratic Republic of Congo, tense, volatile, hard to predict. Sadly, 14 of our soldiers have fallen. 3 staff sergeants, 2 corporals, 1 lance bombardier, 2 lance corporals, 5 riflemen, and 1 private. These are soldiers who made the ultimate sacrifice during the recent battle in the eastern DRC. The situation in that country, it has been dominating the headlines in this country. Now, to what extent will it dominate in the upcoming State of the Nation address? How will recent developments change the tone, change the tenor, change the sentiment of President Cyril Ramaphosa's 8th SONA? Will it morph, given the current political and economic realities on the ground? Look, we know South Africa is still grappling with a lot of issues: poverty, issues of inequality, issues which are often exacerbated by the high unemployment rate. The upcoming address will be an important milestone, no doubt. But will it bring certainty to the country's political, social, and economic landscape? It brings us to our umbrella question of the week. And we ask you, ahead of this week's SONA, what do you think is the state of our nation? Please let us know at SABC News_TV. Let's take a walk, get you some context. There's a list, there's a plethora of issues that South Africa is grappling with. What should be prioritized? What are the low-hanging fruit? Let us know your thoughts. We'd love to hear your thoughts at SABC News_TV. Perspective coming up next, your roundup. All right, these are the stories that are making headlines today. The South African National Defence Force has announced the names of the 14 fallen soldiers who died during the recent battle with the M23 rebels in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. These are the names on your screen right now. The Department of Defence and Military Veterans has sent their heartfelt condolences to the families of the fallen. Meanwhile, the Minister of Defense of countries that contribute troops to form the SADC force deployed in the Democratic Republic of Congo have been tasked with repatriating bodies of the soldiers who died in the latest escalation back home. Now, their mission will include engaging all stakeholders in the latest escalation and negotiate the repatriation. Now, SABC News had a sit down with retired General Derek Mkhwebi, who led SNDF's deployment in the DRC. This is how he says the current situation should be handled.
May their soul rest in peace. The issue of losing people is a very difficult one. Well, training speaks to you must train as you fight. And also equipment, you must be at least properly equipped for the mission or the mandate you are going to conduct. And also your commanders must be up to the task in terms of commanding you in that challenging situation. And of course, the kind of equipment must be, in the latest issue, more technologically advanced to be able to deal with the situation. And you need also the political backup in terms of the actual mission, making sure that there is political direction and also there is political engagement right through. It's not only a military part of it. At the end of the day, they must go to the table. They must find out from M23 what is it that they want. And then within that, there will be at least negotiations. Then they will find solution only around the table.
In other news, the National Police Commissioner General Fani Masemola says 5,500 new recruits will be joining various colleges in the country this week. This to increase police personnel to combat the surge of crime, especially in identified hotspots. Now, Masemola says that from October 2024 to January 2025, there were over 4,000 arrests for rape and attempted rape. He added that over 9,000 were arrested for driving under the influence of alcohol during the festive season. This emerged during a media briefing in the capital today.
People arrested for murder and attempted murder were 4,501. Arrested for rape and attempt were 3,983. 27,640 arrested for assault GBH and 17,311 for common assault. 4,675 were arrested for dealing in drugs, while 27,000 for possession of drugs. 10,042 were arrested for dealing in liquor. 1,952 were arrested for legal possession of firearm, while 1,380 were arrested for being in possession of illegal in possession of ammunition. 9,540 were arrested for driving under the influence of alcohol during the festive period.
All right, the 2025 State of the Nation address, our main topic of the week. Let's get you some context. As always, we turn to the magic wall, what we know and why it matters. My guest tonight, SABC News politics reporter Natasha Piri joins me now live. Tash, good to have you on the program. We need some context, right? So, the president delivering his 8th State of the Nation address on Thursday, 7 p.m. His first one was back in 2018.
Yes.
I wonder how sentiment has changed from 2018 when we heard words like Ramaphosa and the New Dawn. Fast forward to last year. Talk to us about the highlights.
Okay, so the highlights, like you've indicated, he indicated that there was the country had actually, embarked on 30 years of democracy, also reflecting on the challenges and the strides that the country had made, but also acknowledging the fact that South Africans still live under poverty, inequality, and unemployment as well. And those are issues that, as a country, we actually need to overcome. On state capture, Blaine, he had actually described state capture as the greatest test of democracy, but also mentioned that significant strides had been made in that the freezing orders that were granted to the NPA rather amounted to 14 billion. You talk about Eskom and the electricity crisis. Remember, in February, he had mentioned that they are within reach to actually end load shedding. At the opening of Parliament later on that year, on the 19th of July, post the elections, he had lauded government's efforts in reducing load shedding. Of course, we saw what happened over this weekend as well.
That's the thing, right?
Yes.
This was going to be a perfect story to tell in the State of the Nation. There's been a setback with regards to the load shedding this weekend. I wonder how that will change things. But also the big issue here, economy, and infrastructure. We were told back in July that South Africa is going to start looking like a construction site. Any sign of that? You
actually took the words straight out of my mouth. I haven't seen those tangible results yet, but of course we will be speaking to the relevant stakeholders, the Minister of Infrastructure and his deputy as well, Mr. Dean McPherson. The economy, remember, President Cyril Ramaphosa had said at his opening of Parliament address that they've resolved to dedicate three key priorities as the government of national unity. Of course, that being inclusive growth, job creation, reducing poverty and tackling the high cost of living, and building a capable and ethical and developmental state. On crime and gender-based violence, you just actually mentioned Fani Masemola, General Fani Masemola earlier on. Last year, President Cyril Ramaphosa had said that they're going to hire 10,000 more police officers. And in terms of tackling gender-based violence and femicide, over 21 million or billion rand, correct me if I'm wrong, was actually deployed to do away with the scourge.
Right.
which is the second pandemic.
If my memory serves me correct, there were a few bridges that were opened in Mpumalanga of late, connecting the rural communities. I guess the presidency will highlight that as one of the ways. Right. Yes. So now, in terms of the tasks, the notable tasks in 2024, what were they? So
we saw the election of the 7th administration, like you've correctly cited, the election of the president and the speaker, Togo Didiza, the deputy speaker, and a lead laureate of the DA. These two were very contentious. The expropriation bill that was passed, signed into law, the Bella, remember, yes, it was signed into law, but there was a 3 months grace period that was given for the language policy, clause 4 and 5. The language policy and the admission policy. Right. But of course, we've seen, litigation against these very two acts. Various parties within the government of national unity at loggerheads. Litigation is actually also threatened. Right. The DA has lodged a GNU dispute over the expropriation bill. In terms of the Bella, AfriForum as well wants to take this to the highest court in the land, as well as the expropriation bill. So it would be quite interesting to hear what the president has to say in regards to these two. But of course, in time past, we've heard him saying that he will be implementing this. Today, I was at the ANC celebration in Gauteng. Banyaza Lesufi had said, listen, they are backing the president further. He must implement these two acts without fear. Right. Add the NHI and the DA lodging that dispute, the calling for a reset. Yes. Any progress following the cabinet lekgotla, any progress in that regard with regards to research? We'll actually hear clearly from the various parties. I know that the DA has a briefing before Thursday on Wednesday, but I mean the clarion call now for GNU partners is to put their differences aside, Blaine, and work together for the greater good of South Africans. Many times you hear these various political parties saying that we want to put your interests first as South Africans. But I think the greatest test would be to see what actually happens within the GNU and the outcomes as well of the cabinet lekgotla, which will then be translated in the SONA. As you know, that the SONA, sets the tone for the year, the government's priorities as well. But also, let's not forget the dysfunctional municipalities. The president had said that top of the agenda is to stabilize those municipalities. Right. It's a good segue into the next one. Expectations. What could we expect from the president in terms of priorities? We've already covered the inclusive growth and the economy. G20 is very, very important, for us. Of course, the theme for this year, the G20 this year, is fostering solidarity, equality, and sustainable development. It's quite a long one, but basically for Africa's development. So South Africa's, leadership, therefore, presents a unique opportunity, Blaine, to shape global policies and advocate, not only for South Africa, but for Africa's interests on the world stage. Of course, this is a very important one, gender-based violence and femicide. And, you speak to various lobby groups, you speak to, various groups saying that, listen, there needs to be now tangible results. Yes, you've got the policies, but it's time to actually implement, what our leaders have been talking about. And of course, the high issue of unemployment. We came from a place today in Alexandra Township where a majority of the youth are without jobs. I mean, some have resorted to crime, some have resorted to, making or creating their small businesses, but still they don't get the support that they need from government. Thank you for your better mind on this. Thank you, Blaine. Always appreciate her. Thank you. Cool. SABC News reporter Natasha Piri there. Context, always important on its topical. We will discuss further in a short while. All right. Let's get to that discussion. We have a number of guests lined up. Lots of things to handle in terms of the challenges that South Africa face. But what would the president prioritize in the State of the Nation address coming up on Thursday? Let me welcome my guest, Bophelo Seleke, independent analyst dealing with the law, economics and finance currently in the Northwest University. We also have Professor Kedibone Phago, director of the School of Government Studies in Northwest University. Thank you very much indeed for your time. Our digital audience is here as well. Bophelo, maybe I can start with you and just kind of understand the big story of the week, the 2 weeks now, the DRC, the situation in the DRC. There's been casualties in the DRC. It's fueling this debate
on whether the defense should get a bigger slice of the national budget. As we know, the national budget coming up on the 19th of February. The Deputy Defense Minister, General Bantu Holomisa, alluded to the possible move from around 0.57% to over 1.7%, at around 1.7%. Do you see that happening? Is it tangible?
Well, good evening, Blake, and the online community that's viewing this evening. Well, you'd remember that in 2019, there was a draft report chaired by Professor Richard Cullen that sought to look into the South African National Defence Force and its capacity in 2022 and onward. And you'd find that a lot of what was prescribed in the report has still not come to fruition. So the lack of implementation in as far as the South African government, the head of state, with the plethora of special tribunals and reporting committees that will be convened, really leaves much to be desired, or put it very bluntly, to say it doesn't inspire much confidence that there would be the rigorous change that we, members of the academia, professional service, but also citizens of the country would have concerns about.
Professor, do you see the President, by extension the National Treasury, rearranging some of the priorities for the year, given what has happened in the DRC?
Good evening, Blaine, and to the viewers and to the panel that is here tonight. Blaine, there is so much that South Africa needs to do, and there isn't enough time and resources. So it is quite important that there is a focus. What we heard recently from the ANC Lekgotla itself was that they want the president wants to prioritize water. So we really don't know. There's just so many things that are, it's like we are reacting on everything that is happening and are not able to set a proper agenda as a society, looking into the goals of the NDP, the National Development Plan, which is supposed to be a main guiding document on what government is supposed to do, looking into state capacity, whether we have what we need to actually achieve our goals. So this is why you see every year we come and we want to understand what the president seeks to do and his government. So it tells you that there is so much that still remains behind and lagging behind, instead of government bringing us as citizens into its confidence that whatever lies ahead is positive, and that will bring down unemployment, and that will catalyze the economy so that we can thrive as a country. So even this issue of defense, I think it's quite important. It's not only the defense, many of our public institutions, the entire security cluster, the entire economic cluster. So we are really in a situation where we need a very strong leader who's going to set South Africa's agenda and demonstrate to us that this is what we need to do in the next 2 years. We are going to focus so much resources and our attention.
What can, Bophelo, the president do differently this time around that he hasn't done since 2018 that will reinvigorate not only the South African population, but also international investors? Because, last year, I think it was during the OPA, the opening of Parliament address, mentioned that he needs to make South Africa into a construction site. That was the intention. I wonder, are you seeing anything since then that gives you confidence that we're heading in the right direction? Can he change things up on Thursday?
Well, I think in our analysis of the government of national unity, as it were, going forward, there's very little to note in as far as its successes are concerned or it involved. But there's a significant footnote in that we need to score, and it's that by going the Government of National Unity route, it signified, at least to me, a effort on the part of political parties to agree on values and principles that should guide behavior and decision-making, at least at national government, if at any sphere of government. However, I do want to underscore that a critical question does arise, and the question is that will the GNU, as introduced in 2024, will it hold? And the question arises simply because the GNU in its current form requires constituents or constituent parties, I think it's 10 parties that are formed part of the GNU,
yes,
to cooperate and perhaps even to a certain extent put aside their respective differences. Now, this could be particularly a bit of a challenge, and it speaks to the question of will it hold? I mean, an example would be, we know exactly how the DA feels in as far as the recent bills that were translated into law,
right?
The Bella Act, and more recently the Expropriation Act. We also know the fervent conversations around the NHI. But the question of whether it will hold, for me, requires first an examination of the person that is placed to lead the Government of National Unity, and that's President Cyril Ramaphosa. And in the long run, I don't know if we have the luxury of planning a GNU with President Cyril Ramaphosa still at the helm, taking into consideration that there is a very steep or a high hurdle that the ANC and by extension the president himself has to clear in as far as the EFF's core challenge is concerned with the Phala report and how the parliamentary arm of the state chose to dispose of the report and not thoroughly interrogate it. So we may be talking about a leader of a GNU that may not necessarily even be a president of the country should the Constitutional Court make its pronouncement or hand down the judgment in a unfavoring, if one would put it like that, manner or fashion. So there's quite a lot of points that are hanging in the air, the values and the constitution of the GNU going forward. But maybe perhaps before we move on, we must also underscore what the GNU had undertaken as a priority for them. And it speaks to the driving of inclusive growth and job creation, given the high unemployment rate of South African youth in particular. But there's also a focus on reducing poverty and the tackling of high-cost living and the building of a capable, ethical, and developmental state. And from your conversation with your reporter colleague earlier, none of these three priorities, as we speak, have spoken to a positive report card assessment in as far as the GNU is concerned. Thanks.
Prof, look, economic growth, boosting investor confidence, seen as key. How much is riding on the Government of National Unity staying together in its current form?
So, Blaine, what we have seen so far is that it managed to hold for as long as it could. And this has actually sent a very positive sentiment to the investor community. And I think the president wrote on that when recently he was speaking in Davos at the World Economic Forum, demonstrating that the Government of National Unity has brought in a lot of stability and that there is a lot of unity. Of course, with the some of the concerns of the ideological differences in terms of the policy positions of the DA and of course the ANC as the major parties in the Government of National Unity. But what we want to see more, and I think ANC recently, I think the Minister of in one of the economic clusters has actually articulated the point that they have put aside a fund that they need to put and make sure that they support SMMEs.
Are you talking about the proposed transformation fund?
that's correct. That's correct. That the Minister Pakstow is working on. And I think the challenge, Blaine, is that this is not new. Since 1994, government has always been talking about the economic transformation, inclusive growth, building rural economy. You know, we don't see anything that relates to that on the ground. And so I think what the voters have done in the 29th of May last year was to send a message very loud and very clear to the ANC in particular, but also to other political parties that if you do not take us serious, we will punish you. And I think the message there was primarily based on the fact that government needs to deliver its services, that government needs to improve its capacity to make sure that we have a functional and, of course, an efficient government. So that question of economy is going to be key up until the end of this new government.
Let's go to our digital audience, get their take. I want to talk to Jade. If you can unmute. If you had the president's ear, Jade, what would you tell him to prioritize in his State of the Nation address?
Thank you, Blaine. Good evening, everyone and the audience. For me, I believe that we want the real state of the nation. Our president should not be telling us about fictitious smart cities and us needing to Mayena. We need to hear the plan on the infrastructure, what's the plan on our healthcare, and how will we ensure that cutting off the USAID funding does not have any long-term effects on the right against HIV and AIDS. And also, as a student, this is coming from a student, what's the update on the higher education? Because it's been 10 years since the Fees Must Fall movement.
Yes.
Since it has started, yes, access to the higher education is still limited. And lastly, what's the plan for the rural areas to get access to the basic services since it's been 31 years after democracy? Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Jade. Let's hear from Alton and Ngobo. Alton, your thoughts?
Yes, I will start here by saying that we are 30 years into democracy. And as we are 30 years into democracy, what we have witnessed lately is the creation of the government of national unity. However, it is a locomotion that the voters believed they'll be delivered through. In regards of this incoming SONA for 2025, the president, if I would get a chance to be next to his ear, I will greatly propose that he shall furthermore amend the act on the public finance to fight for corruption. Also on the employment, that act should be amended, because we can't be having a restriction of 35th of age, that once you reach that age, you are useless to the state. And also the act for minerals and energy, we have seen the crisis on Zamazamas and also on the home affairs and border management.
Right.
Those are the act I would advise.
Right, raft of issues. Let's go to Omashilo before we take a quick break. If you can unmute. Can you hear us? It seems that we're having a bit of an issue. Let's take David. We'll go back to Mashilo. David, your thoughts?
Hey, good afternoon, Mr. Blake.
Hi, David. Go ahead.
If I were to be given a space and time just to be closer with the president, just for a mere 5 minutes, I think I will have to try to advise from his sitting MPs, because when you can look at some of the departments, you happen to realize that there's MC and 2 deputies. My question is, what are the functional role for the second deputy? Then I have to ask the president, what should be his pondering reaction, particularly when you look about the situation now that is happening in DRC Congo, equally to the withdrawal of the aid from President Donald Trump.
Yes.
That what is his plan, particularly to check what should be if we fail to receive any medical assistance, what this nation should be. Then we have to sit down and craft and develop a constructive plan that will talk to the community,
right,
and to have reliable members who can implement that. Thank you very much, Mr. Blaine.
David, thank you very much indeed. I'll come back to Mashilo in a short while. We need to take a quick break. What about our foreign policy as well? Are we using it to pursue developmental goals in this country? We're going to talk a bit about that as well. Also, the situation in the DRC. It's going to be hanging over this State of the Nation address. To what extent? How would the president address this issue? More next. Welcome back. You're watching It's Topical. We're previewing the State of the Nation address coming up on Thursday. Big one, right? Raft of issues to tackle. What should the president prioritize? Our umbrella question is, what is the state of this nation currently? How should the president, the government of national unity, tackle the various issues that South Africa is currently dealing with? We asked for your thoughts via WhatsApp, and this is what you had to say. Take a look.
More to hear about it's the issue of ESCOM now and the issue of Bella Act. Those are some of the issues that I want to hear how deep the president will go, and the government of GNU. What are the plans in the next coming 5 years?
The key indicators in terms of growth, in terms of unemployment, is not looking good for the country. So something must be done to stimulate growth, to also, increase employment.
State of our nation is crime, unemployment, gender-based violence, drugs.
I would be happy if the president addressed the issue of crime. People are dying in South Africa like more than DRC or South Sudan. People are killing each other like flies in South Africa. I wish the president can address that.
If the government can negotiate, ask for a peaceful dialogue in as far as the M23 is concerned.
I wonder which song will the president be singing this year? It's been the same thing for the past years. There's no change. Looking at the high rate of unemployment in our country, high rate of crime. I wonder what will be his strategy this year, because we need action rather than all the talk. We need action. And I hope more than anything, he starts sympathizing with a lot of young South Africans that are jobless.
All right, we really appreciate your thoughts on this matter. Before we go back to our guests, I want to take a few more comments from our digital audience. Let's hear from Lungile. Lungile, your thoughts?
Evening, Hemens, also to the viewers and the digital audience here. What I would also like to know from the president is the issue on how he is going to eradicate the issue of unemployment. And also to check how he's going to bring the mechanism on how to deal with the issues of NSFAS, because it's a challenge. As we are speaking now, the students, they don't have their result as we speak. Because of the paymaster, there is a challenge, a huge challenge, which it needs the president to address it.
Right.
That one will help. And also the implementation. If you have action plan but you don't implement them, I think it's a waste of time.
Right. Lungile, thank you very much indeed. Bophelo, look, I guess people's priorities will differ depending on their lived experience, right?
Yeah.
Substance, concrete plans, inspirational. These are the basic ingredients for a sound State of the Nation address. What sort of balance does the president need to strike here?
Yeah, Well, I think let me take the lead from the last comment in as far as South Africa's foreign policy is concerned, and then make my way back. Now, as far as we know, sitting here, South Africa is not threatened by any of its neighbors. However, illegal migration continues or is still a persistent major concern since, I mean, in the early late 90s or so. Now, perceptions are growing, and this is particularly what the president needs to speak to. Perceptions are growing that migrants are overwhelming the resources of the country, and they take jobs from South Africans and engage in crime. Now, that's a discussion in itself that we can enter into later. However, we must also take into consideration that when we deal with foreign policy or diplomatic relations, be it as it may, addressing regional dynamics, whether it's in the SABC or further afield, requires a strong foreign policy stance and robust measures to pursue peace, be it now with the very public spat between our head of state and the President Paul Kagame, be it the loss of lives that you alluded to as we began this program of the soldiers. I think it's 14 now.
Right.
That have succumbed to the challenges in the West region and up above. Now, the Balancing Act speaks to also the core of what the GNU is, and it's that political parties with vast differences are able to come together and say, for the development of this country and for the growth of this country and opportunities for the people of this country, we can put aside our ideological differences and work towards building a country that is for all South Africans, and that includes South Africans in its development, be it at a professional service level and other sectors that contribute positively to the country.
Professor, do you think the president is rewriting his State of the Nation address, given the developments in the DRC? Point one, if he's not, should he? Should he address the issues, for instance, with Rwandan President Paul Kagame at the State of the Nation address, the situation in the DRC, or should he rather leave that at bay, rather leave it to maybe the SADC chair to address these issues? What's your thoughts on that?
Blaine, I think it's not going to be a very complex issue for South Africa. We know the role of South Africa in the diplomatic relations with many African countries. It has always been a soft diplomacy, which many do not think has worked. But I think that has, when South Africa uses what they normally refer to as soft power, it has actually helped position South Africa to be considered friendly and a very serious nation globally in the context of geopolitical discourses. So what you'll find is that this has positioned South Africa to serve as a mediator for many conflict-ridden countries. So I don't see any change in approach from the president, except, as you say, to leave this matter to be handled through SADC. But we must also remember that this is also already a UN matter. So it's going to be quite important for the president to make sure that any view, any South African policy position with regard to the challenge of the M23 rebels that are operating in the DRC is pushing that through diplomatic relations. I think if he follows that path, and it looks like he has already taken that path, it is actually going to strengthen and even undermine any voices that may want to cast aspersion on South Africa. So I think in his State of the Nation address, if I were him, I would just continue to put an emphasis into those international structures, the SADC, the AU, and the UN, to deal with those issues.
What sort of message, Bophelo, should he be sending via his State of the Nation to other world leaders like the likes of Donald Trump? You see tariffs flying back and forth between Canada and the United States. What sort of stance or approach should he take in the State of the Nation address?
Okay, twofold. I think one, a very localized version of development of South Africa would be a prioritization of goods or products that are made in South Africa. If we look at, I think it's the recent report by Brand South Africa in as far as what we export and what we import, South Africa does have the capacity, and it's proven over and over again that we can compete even on bigger world stages in as far as production. Be it of food and be it of other utilities or products that we produce internally. Now, the focus or perhaps the message could be that we're just as good as American products or perhaps other countries' imports that we bring into South Africa, and a prioritization to say perhaps let's not make locally produced goods inaccessible to the very people in the country, right. And a promotion perhaps of a internal trade. I mean, the focus would be or has been for the past many years that we seek to attract foreign direct investment, but we don't really speak to the internal or the direct internal investment that we have internally as a South African economy, a GDP that is thriving and is a breadbasket compared to other states. Right. But if I can bring it a bit closer to home and ahead of the 2026 elections, I think one message, if any at all, that the president ought to focus on would be a prioritization of poor governance and the professionalization of local government, because that's really at the coalface of service delivery and where many of the issues in as far as citizens you find concentrated in. Yeah. So service delivery failures such as water provision really stem from inadequate skills and perhaps even corruption and maladministration. We can speak or talk till the cows come home in as far as the failures of state-owned entities, although ESCOM does seem, I don't know, recent 48 hours, but it does seem to be turning a tide. Yes. However, the same can't be said for Post Office and Transnet, which speak really to systematic inefficiencies and corruption. And just maybe on a last note, the 2021 July unrests also speak to, institutional weaknesses. Right. And we've got, 3 reports already that are easily available to the public. We've got the Callan report. We've also got the Sydney Mafumadi report, which speaks to the inefficiencies of our intelligence service. And we've also got the recently commissioned report of the service professionalization of the service and the military of South Africa. So we don't need any more reports. We need implementation, and that's what the president needs to speak to.
Right. Something also, the various areas of ports and logistics, freight rail management system, all will be in sharp focus in terms of being fixed in order to get some tangible results. Jade, let's bring you back into the conversation. I just want to know from your vantage point, your perspective, since 2018, I assume you watch every State of the Nation address. How's it changed for you? How's the tone changed for you?
Thank you. I feel like with the State of the Nation, what I can see is that our government is capable. The only issue is the implementation. It's the procrastination in our policy being implemented. We have the best policies, but nothing is being implemented.
Yeah. David, let's bring you into the conversation. I mean, Bophelo was talking about local government elections, and it's really when you deal with local government elections in 2026, those are really the bread and butter issues, right? The service delivery provisions, water, electricity, the traffic lights working on a daily basis. What would you like to hear from the president now that kind of talks to fixing the issues on the ground?
Yeah, thank you very much once again, Mr. Blaine. What is important here is about the implementation part of, you'll understand that day in, day out, there is a budget allocated to some certain projects.
Yeah.
But you ask yourself, those projects will take some ages. Some of them, they can even fail to complete that. So it simply tells that the administration part of it's not well being administrated. And the people who have been hired to perform such a particular project, they are not fully knowledgeable enough, or if they are just doing the should work. So I think now the focus is let's hire somebody who has a track record. At the end of the day, will perform the job at its utmost best. Because if you may look from all different walks, there is some tar road would be left unattended. Bridges are not yet completed. Projects are left redundant. But the allocation of budgets are there. So that's what something President must do.
Right.
That whoever has been assigned to run with that one must be taken care of so that they can complete the project. Thank you very much once again.
All right, David. Oratile, are you with us? Let's give you a try. Let's get your thoughts in terms of some of the priorities.
Can you hear me now?
Loud and clear. Go ahead.
I'm so sorry about the technical issue. What I do hope to hear from the SONA, which will take place on Thursday, is basically the president's input on the current education system, because the beginning of this year, we saw so many students that were unplaced in schools, so many parents crying for help, and also that overcrowding in schools were a huge problem, with the DA actually mentioning that during their visit sites, they saw schools with about 1 to 50 learner-teacher ratio. So I do hope that the president will announce their current education system in place.
All right, Taylor, thank you very much indeed. Prof, let's bring you into this. Look, almost every department is calling for more money, right? Education, health, defense. How do you do this while still trying to ensure that you reduce debt and also couple that with fiscal discipline? How do you incorporate all of this?
Blaine, so governance is quite a complex task. And so the reason we have the configuration of the national government sphere, the provincial government sphere, and the local government sphere is to try and organize the state capacity in the manner that it is. So all these are very clearly and very specifically defined in the constitutions on what are the roles of these different spheres of government. So you will see if, for example, somebody raises the question of health, it will be defined on what is the role of the national government in terms of health issues and the role of the provincial government. And so sometimes there are concurrent roles for the various spheres of government. So it is really these kind of questions on if we have a budget for health in this particular instance, how do we make these allocations, but how do we also make sure that the state has capacity to implement the policies and that we keep government accountable. And this is why we have the role of the media, the kind of exercise we are doing now. Yeah. But also we want to see a much more concerted role of the civil society, making sure that they take up those government inefficiencies. And in some cases, they should take them to court and say, Department X is failing to implement the government policy. Because if we do not put those kind of measures in place, we will continue. If you hear a lot of comments from the online viewers and these digital participants, is that people are just worried about the basics. Do we Are we going to wake up tomorrow and still have water?
Yes.
Can I still drive from Pretoria to Johannesburg? Will I have my lights on? And I think it tells you that the question of state capacity is quite prominent today in South Africa as a discourse.
Bophelo, last word to you in about 30 seconds. Low-hanging fruit?
I don't think it's a question of additional budgets. It's a question of stopping the illicit flows from the country's fiscus, from the budget that are already allocated to departments, and a focus on strong skills. I mean, a capacitation of the NPA. Shamila Batoyi has spoken about the need for capably qualified prosecutors in the areas that they don't have expertise in. Affording SIU, NPA, IPID, and other law enforcement agencies the space to actually implement their mandate and go after these illicit flows and the regression of the moral fiber of our society.
Bophelo, thank you very much indeed. Professor Phago, always appreciate your perspective on this matter. Digital audience, thank you so much. No doubt we will continue this conversation. Thursday, 7 p.m., SABC News has you covered with regards to the State of the Nation address, the build-up, what matters, what needs to be expedited, what should be prioritized. Keep it locked on to SABC News for all the very latest. Thank you very much indeed to my guests and digital audience. All right, before we go, here's my take. Look, perspective matters, right? How does the past 30 years look from your point of view? Are we fully benefiting from the policies of a democratic state? And if not, why? It is in the answering of this simple question that will help us get to a better place as a nation. It's all about trying to move forward through the crucible of our collective experience, because iron sharpens iron, right? Improving each other through mutual support and challenges. We need clear timelines. We need commitment from our leaders. We need consistency in doing the right thing. And that's my take. If you miss anything on this program, then be sure to watch this episode of It's Topical on YouTube. Trends travel up next. If you're watching a repeat of this program, then as always, the news continues. Until next week, my brothers and sisters, take care. Bye-bye.